Offshore oil and gas drilling and production is a risky business. There have been many infamous tragedies over the years, such as Piper Alpha and Deepwater Horizon, but this is the story of the North Sea's forgotten disaster which killed 13 people, the Sea Gem accident. The United Kingdom's oil and gas bonanza started in the 1960s. Buoyed by finding oil and gas reserves onshore in the east of England, reservoir engineers predicted that reservoirs extended into the North Sea, off the coast of Lincolnshire and East Yorkshire. So preparations started for exploration drilling offshore. In the 1960s, offshore oil drilling was still a developing industry. The first mobile offshore drilling unit, or MODU for short, was the Mr. Charlie, a semi-submersible unit that first operated in the Gulf of Mexico in 1954. This was followed by the first jack-up MODU, the Mr. Louis, in 1959. For a jack-up MODU, the rig is towed into position, then legs are lowered to the seabed and the rig jacked up to the desired height above the waves, where drilling operations can be started. The Sea Gem was also a jack-up rig, following the same design principles as Mr. Louis. Mr. Louis actually drilled the first hole in the North Sea in May 1964, in the German sector 30 miles off Juist Island, and also made the first North Sea gas discovery just 1 month later. In the British sector, attempts were also being made to find hydrocarbons. 3 wells were attempted between December 1964 to September 1965. 2 wells were drilled by a rig called Mr. Cap, and a third by the drillship Glomar 4. But all wells were dry, so the baton was passed to the Sea Gem to continue the search for black gold. Sea Gem was originally a 5,600-ton steel barge, built in America but converted to function as an oil rig by British Petroleum in 1964. The conversion involved fitting 10 steel legs, making it possible to raise the barge 15 metres above the water surface, as well as a helipad, living quarters for a crew of 34, and a drilling derrick. On 5th of June 1965, the rig became operational when it was towed from Middlesbrough to a location 42 miles east of the River Humber. The rig jacked down and drilling commenced, with work continuing 24 hours a day for the next 104 days. The drill had reached a depth of 8,500 feet, and it was starting to look as though this was yet another dry hole, when dials began to flicker showing the presence of some gas. It was commonplace to find small pockets of gas as the drill bit went deeper, and nobody was getting too excited. But then it was noticed that the drilled fluid returning from the bottom of the well was tending to froth and bubble. Cautious signals were sent to the Cleethorpes Basin Code, reporting that something was happening. A lot of speculation was being made in the press and in UK Parliament at this time, so expectations were high and a lot of attention was put on the drill rigs currently working in the North Sea. On 20th September, the Sea Gem crew decided to stop drilling and run a drill stem test to make a preliminary assessment of the flow and pressure of gas, which proved to be positive. The historic announcement of the first hydrocarbon find was made, saying, "A test in BP's North Sea well now being drilled by the Sea Gem 42 miles east of Humber has produced gas, but not in sufficient volume to be commercially significant." Despite this very guarded and downbeat announcement, the press went into a frenzy with their headlines. From that time onwards, North Sea gas was no longer conjecture, but a reality. The Sea Gem crew continued drilling until the well was finally completed at a depth of 10,000 feet. On 9th of December, further dramatic headlines appeared in the press when a 40-foot flame was ignited at the top of the rig, the first flare to be lit in the whole of the North Sea. The full extent of the discovery was not realised until further wells were drilled at a later date, and the field would eventually yield 50 million cubic feet of natural gas a day, enough to supply a city the size of Sheffield or Leeds. The reservoir would go on to form part of the West Sole Field. On 27th December, just 2 days after Christmas, the crew attempted to jack down the rig to move to another site 2 miles away. The biting North Sea winter weather had enveloped the rig with wintry snow showers, temperatures of 3 degrees and 15-foot high waves. The jacking operation was proving problematic, with some jacks slipping when 2 of the forward starboard legs failed, leaving the hull at an uneven keel. The rig began to tilt sideways and men were thrown out of their bunks whilst others on the upper deck were pitched into the icy waters of the North Sea. The torsion ripped a 4-inch wide tear in the hull, which started filling with water. No distress message had been made as the radio cabin was washed into the sea. One of the survivors described how he was reading in his cabin when a shell fell down and hit him on the head. He went up on deck and helped other men trying to release a life raft, but the waves prevented them. They managed to free another raft and he and 13 others clambered on board. Luckily for the crew, the British cargo ship Boltrover was a mile or so away when the rig collapsed. The chief engineer Leonard Woodhouse had watched the whole disaster from the bridge and couldn't believe his eyes. At 14:09, the Boltrover made the first distress call. "Oil rig Sea Gem has just collapsed and sinking. I'm sending a boat across to her. Require further assistance." Some of the crew who hadn't taken to the life raft or had been thrown into the sea scrambled to the end of the platform which was floating highest out of the water, but they were taken under when the whole platform, after floating at a crazy angle for a while, suddenly turned right over without warning. Most of the survivors were rescued by the Boltrover, but an RAF Westland Whirlwind search and rescue helicopter also joined the search. By the time the helicopter had arrived, there was nothing to be seen of the rig except for one of the legs sticking above the water and a mass of wreckage. The pilot, Sergeant Lee Smith, described the situation as pandemonium. The winchman, Flight Lieutenant John Hill, winched down twice and rescued 2 men from the sea before he was exhausted. The navigator, Sergeant John Reason, volunteered to take his place and rescued a 3rd man, a 16-stone survivor who was tangled in wires and metal, and the man and debris was all picked up together and transferred into the helicopter. In the face of disaster, the 3 airmen had reached the limits of human endurance to rescue the survivors. 19 crew were rescued in total from the freezing waters, but tragically 13 others lost their lives. The inquiry that inevitably followed the disaster attributed the cause of the accident to failed tie bars connecting the legs to the jacking systems. 5 of the legs had broken or missing tie bars. A combination of cyclic wave loading and the low North Sea temperatures had led to brittle fatigue fracture of the bars. The recommendations from the inquiry paved the way for groundbreaking regulations to manage safety on offshore installations, notably the Mineral Workings Offshore Installations Act 1971. The regulations included the provision of standby vessels for all rigs operating in UK waters, and the appointment of an offshore installation manager on every installation to manage the rig. But this all came too late for the 13 lost souls of North Sea's forgotten disaster. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video.